Hello to anyone who chooses to watch this virtual presentation. My name is Jake Greenberg. I'm an associate professor of surgery at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. It's my pleasure and privilege to give this talk on it's never too early to set your professional goals, even if they change. These are my disclosures. I am a site PI for clinical trials from both BD Interventional and Medtronic and do not receive any salary support for either. But more importantly, I think, is this disclaimer is that this talk is a fun one to write because there are no data here, and there really is no right way to set goals. I think it's a very personal experience and something that you have to do based on what your interests are. So I will share my thoughts and my personal experience, but really firmly believe that you have to do what works well for you. So setting goals is something that we have done all as individuals since we were incredibly young. And I love this quote from Mark Twain that without dreams and goals, there is no living, only merely existing. And that is not why we are here. And I think he's right. Without a goal, we have no vision, no place to go, and no sense of what we want to do with our lives, either professionally or personally. So I do think it's a critically important step to your success as a surgeon and as a human being. Now, when you Google setting goals, you will find literally a never-ending list of tips and strategies and tricks for setting successful goals. More importantly, you'll find an equally large list of failures and an entire library of self-help books that goes well beyond what I think you would ever need to read in order to set good goals. I really like this one, Setting Goals Like a Boss, because I think it walks you through stepwise what you need to do, which is one, work out what you want, figure out what you enjoy, start small, define your goals, break it up into little pieces, and set a realistic time frame. And so the way that I've ended up applying that is through a couple of other steps. And I think the most important step is the first one, which is to know thyself. You have to focus on what you want. And that starts by really thinking about what you're passionate about, what you enjoy doing, and what you're good at. And when you combine those three things, you can find this nice little sweet spot right in the middle where they all overlap. And you are going to likely be most successful at achieving those goals in which you have passion, in which you have skill, and those which bring you personal satisfaction. So I think it's critically important when you sit down and decide what it is that you want to do with your career to find that sweet spot. Focus on the things that you feel most passionate about, what you're best at, and what you care the most about. And I think you're going to have the likeliest chance of persevering in those goals if even you fail early. It's also probably worthwhile to spend some time working in these other areas where things overlap, because you could find that that could become your sweet spot, again, as your goals change with time. I think the next key step is to know your institution, right? So once you've figured out what you like and what your sweet spot is, you need to figure out if you're going to be able to be successful at achieving the goals within your sweet spot at the institution you currently work in. Because a lot of times your personal goals may not be aligned with those of your department, your division, your institution. And if so, you're likely not going to have financial or other support to accomplish them. So having a sense of where your sweet spot is and making sure that it aligns with the goals of your institution as well as the support and needs of your institution is critical to your success. Otherwise, you're going to just keep running into a brick wall that you unfortunately can't get around, no matter how much you have the ability to persevere and no matter how talented you are. You do need institutional support. So knowing your institution and knowing how well that your goals align with the institutional's goals is critical to your success as well. Goals require grit. Angela Duckworth is a professor of psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and for those that haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. She's really the world's expert on grit, and Professor Duckworth defines grit as the passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And she, in the book, really kind of debunks the ideas that success comes from innate talent, but rather supports the idea that it really comes from effort and resilience. In fact, she pretty accurately describes how effort really counts twice through all of this. For example, you may be a talented musician, right? You may be the next Mozart. But if you don't apply effort, you'll never develop the skill that you need to be a successful musician. Once you do apply said effort and have said skill, You then need to take that skill and apply effort towards it to accomplish achievements. And so effort really counts twice through all of this. So her recommendation is to set a long-term goal, right? You always have to have an idea of where you want to end up. So you're at your starting point now, but you want to get to here, but you have to have very realistic expectations. You don't get from your starting point to your long-term goal in a day, in a week, in a month, or in a year. It takes a lot of time. And more importantly, it looks a lot more like this, right? You get to your long-term goal by setting very realistic shorter-term goals that are in one way or another in alignment with that ultimate goal. So thinking in year chunks. So what's your goal for year 1, year 3, year 5, and all the way out to year X, so that you are going to eventually accomplish whatever it is that you want to do over the long term. You have to work through these goals deliberately. You have to think about where you are currently, where you want to be, and what small incremental steps you can get to make it from point A all the way to point Z. And you have to remember that you walk before you run. Again, this is not a linear path. It's a very curvilinear one that often will be redirected. More importantly, you have to continually reassess your goals and shift them as needed. What was at one point your long-term goal may change dramatically for a variety of personal and professional reasons that you didn't think about when you were at your starting point, year 1, year 5, year 10. And so you need to be flexible. You need to be able to change your long-term goal if you see that it's important to do so. And more importantly, I think you never need to be satisfied. You always need to feel that your goals have not always been met and that you can do more to accomplish more if you so choose. The last step in my sort of thought process around this is to be ready for change, right? Change is inevitable. That change can happen in your personal life. It can happen in your professional environment. You might decide that you are suddenly interested in something else. And prior to this year, who knew that a global pandemic could change everything that we know about our life? But it certainly has, right? I think Charles Darwin said it best in that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's the most adaptable to change. And I think when you are thinking about what your professional and personal goals are, you need to be highly adaptable to the changes that you never saw coming that are going to have significant impact on your ability to accomplish those goals. Now, not everyone is a fan of goals. Stephen Covey has this quote, which you can find all over the internet, that says, "Stop setting goals. Goals are pure fantasy unless you have a specific plan to achieve them." When I first saw this, I thought it was a little bit frustrating and that maybe Stephen Covey was just some sort of whack job. But unfortunately, he's actually written another book that I would highly recommend, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? An incredible best-selling book that tells you how to be more effective at pretty much everything in life, but specifically your professional life. So I think he actually knows what he's talking about. And as I started to think about where I had been throughout the course of my life and the goals that I had set at those times, I realized that while I realize and sort of feel like I have achieved many of the things that I've wanted to, certainly not all, it actually came because of a bunch of changes in my goals over time. So I wanted to walk through sort of my path to where I am currently, which is certainly not success. So as an undergraduate, my goal was to become a professional musician. I was a bass player. I had studied music my entire life, was a music major as an undergraduate, and that was what I wanted to do, and that was a fail. It was not what I ended up doing. So my fallback plan on that was to try and get into medical school, which thankfully was successful, and then to continue to be a musician in my free time. In med school, my goal was to match in plastic surgery. I had done rotations in craniofacial plastics and pediatric plastics and thought it was just an incredible experience and a phenomenal specialty. And in the match was starting to apply in plastic surgery, and then really made a significant career change when I did a sub-I rotation with my then mentor, who was a colorectal surgeon. He was a young faculty member. He was happily married. He had 3 kids. He sat down and talked to his patients. He did open and laparoscopic cases, and he really treated patients and everyone else in the hospital with respect and kindness. And he was exactly who I wanted to be as a surgeon. And that is what made me decide and see a path for myself in general surgery. So at the last minute, I changed my ERAS application. I got new letters of recommendation and decided to apply in general surgery. And then in residency, my goal was to become that mentor. It was to become a colorectal surgeon. I spent 2 years of my time as a resident doing outcomes research in colon and rectal surgery, but also with one of those colon and rectal surgeons started doing a little bit in surgical education research. And that is where I found my passion and my sweet spot. It wasn't in the research, and it still isn't today, but it was in surgical education. I found that I had a real passion for teaching, that I enjoyed that aspect of our professional lives almost as much, if not more, than operating. And so for me, working around surgical educators, that is really where I found my sweet spot, and has been still the goal that I pursue today. So as a PGY5, I was filling out my application in colon and rectal surgery and realized that I was about to apply in the wrong field. And I realized this only because my wife, who is way smarter than I, said that I was applying in the wrong field. She recognized that the things that I liked most about colon and rectal were the laparoscopic colectomies, and that the days that I came home after laparoscopic cases, I was much happier than when I came home after open cases. And she recognized that what I really liked was minimally invasive surgery. And so again, at the last minute, changed my fellowship applications from colorectal to MIS, and was fortunate to match into a phenomenal fellowship program at UMass. I got my first job in the faculty at UW largely because of my wife. She was recruited out here to start a surgical outcomes research program, and I was a chief resident in general surgery when we got recruited. But at that time, I knew that my passion and my interests were in surgical education, and my goal was to become a program director as soon as I possibly could. The other thing that I was really interested in was hernia surgery, and so I wanted to establish and run a comprehensive hernia center that built a lot of clinical volume, did some outcomes research, and focused on quality improvement. And then my last professional career goal was to build a national name as an educator and a hernia surgeon, and I thought I could do that through work in these 4 societies: SAGES, the America's Hernia Society, the Association for Surgical Education and Program Directors in Surgery, and through the AAS, and potentially through the SUS as I transition. So my goals for the first 5 years were to start to get active in those societies, hopefully become a program director, and establish and run the hernia center. And the reality was that I did not achieve most of those in my first 5 years. I did come in named as an associate program director in the general surgery residency. About 2 years into my time on the faculty, we started an MIS fellowship. And in the first year of that fellowship, the current fellowship program director changed institutions and left. And so I was asked by our division chief to take over as the fellowship program director. And I actually was really conflicted about this because I thought it put me at odds with the residents who I really wanted to be the leader of. Starting a new fellowship obviously is viewed as a challenge for the residency, and I thought it would actually put me in a negative light, but I took the job on because I didn't think we really had anyone else at the time that wanted to or was interested in doing it. So I ran it up until we hired a new division chief who then took over as the fellowship program director. I tried to volunteer and be active on committees. I was fortunate to be named as the chair of the AAS Education Committee for a 2-year period during those first 5 years, but otherwise it was just like a lot of committee work and no real leadership roles. And then a huge change happened at our institution, that we simultaneously lost both our division chief in general surgery and our department chair, and it left a significant void. Fortunately, during that void, there was a restructuring of education, and the person who had been our program director became the vice chair of education, and it opened up a job opportunity for me as the program director, which I took over in 2017. So in 2018, we had a new chair, and when she came in, one of her goals was to meet with every faculty member. And in anticipation of that meeting, I sat down and really thought about what the next 10 years of my professional life should look like. And so I came up with this document that I walked through with her to talk about my goals in terms of staying at our institution, leading the residency program, what I wanted to do with the hernia center, and what I, again, wanted to do with my national name. And this is still what I'm currently working through. That 10-year department chair goal, I'm not so sure anymore. It doesn't look like a great job these days. And I don't know if that's what I want to do over the long term or not. So it's, again, something that I will continue to reassess as time goes on. But I think it's important to sit down and really put thought to paper for this so that you can really think about what's important to you and again, what you're good at and what you're passionate about. If you really follow those three major principles with the institutional support and your flexibility to change, I think you can have success with planning these goals over the long term. Don't forget the other critically important goals in your life. And those are the ones outside of work. And for me, those goals are first and foremost, and they remain and always will be to be a good husband, to be a better father, to raise good people as children, and to be a good human being myself and to be a good citizen. And this was a picture of our daughter's bat mitzvah, fortunately, just before COVID struck. So we got to have a wonderful family celebration in February of this year to her incredible accomplishments. So, you know, setting goals can be daunting, but I think they're very important to your success. And again, I think know yourself, right? Find that sweet spot for you, and it's different for everyone. But find what really makes you tick and what you're good at and what you care about. And then know that your institution has your back for that. And if it does, you're at the right place. If it's not, you either need to think about finding something else that you're good at or finding a different place. Never give up on what's important, right? Things will get tough. You will have challenges. You will have roadblocks. If you keep focusing on what you're passionate about and what drives you, you will find ways to get around them, and don't quit. Be amenable and ready for change. And again, maintain those life goals. What we do at work is important, but what we do at home is far more so. So always keep that in mind and set goals like a boss. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me or direct message me anytime. Thank you and stay safe, everyone.